Thanks, Kelly, and thanks again for inviting us to present. My name is Leah Finlayson. I'm the Director of Victim Services at the Senior Law Center. Let me just tell you a little bit about myself, and then Brandan will also introduce himself, and we'll start. So just so you know, I know there are my staff here. There's staff from my old employer, North Penn Legal Services. We have done some variation of this presentation last year, but we have tried to put in 90% of new content so that you're not falling asleep. But some of the issues are foundational, so we have those in there. And you know, I understand that I'm basically looking at a blank screen with names, but I'd like this to be as interactive as possible. So any comments in the chat, Brendan will look out for it when I'm speaking, and I will look out when he's speaking. And then if people can unmute themselves anytime and ask a question, that's great as well. So that's really what I prefer. A lot of the things that we're going to go through, really, we would like some interactions. So hopefully this will be an enjoyable hour and a half. And Brendan and I like to tell stories, so hopefully it'll go. Okay. All right. So Brendan, so let me just tell you a little bit about myself. So prior to working at the Senior Law Center, I was the managing attorney with another employee, Lori Malloy, at the Bethlehem office. So I know that there's some of my former coworkers here, so I'm happy to sort of see them, even if virtually. Like most of you in the legal aid world, we did everything that came in through the door in terms of what our priorities were. So stopping homelessness, lots of child custody cases, lots of landlord-tenant cases. So even though, you know, in Senior Law Center, we're specialized with seniors 60 and older, because of the VOCA grant that we get, that most of your agencies have, really we could do lots of the same types of cases as when there's a nexus between the domestic violence and whatever the legal issue is. So I'm using some of my consumer background, still advising somewhat on bankruptcies, doing lots of landlord-tenant work, those kinds of things. So that's why I find it pretty enjoyable, the transition, because I really did enjoy the work that I did at North Penn. So Brandan, did you want to introduce yourself a little bit to the group?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everybody. I recognize some friends out there, the names, and some esteemed colleagues. That's great to see you or not see you. Welcome. I've been at Senior Law since 2019. I started as a staff attorney in Bucks County. Now I have the pleasure and privilege of working with Leah, sort of supervising, managing, and supporting our victim services team. Prior to coming to Senior Law Center, I was working for another legal aid organization in Philadelphia. I did all kinds of things, mostly family law, so custody, no-fault divorces, and especially I did 7 appeals of Social Security denials and was successful in all of those appeals. I was working in the field, so I was often working in the neighborhoods where clients lived, and I enjoyed that immensely. Often I was working with clients in their home for various reasons, and I was working also with federally qualified health centers throughout Philadelphia who provided health care at no cost, and a legal service was part of what they were offering their community there. So it was very enjoyable for me, and I really learned a lot doing that, as well as, so some of you know, I've been in different organizations as a law student, as an intern, and all of that made me a much better person and hopefully a better lawyer. One of the things that's happening now is we're expanding our litigation here at Senior Law, and it's really exciting, especially under Leah's guidance. We're really looking to get a holistic service for our clients. And it's challenging, as all of you know who work in legal aid, every day something different. But I'm very happy to be here and work with this team.
I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully all this comes together, right? Okay, let's actually back up a little bit. All right, so the problem is when I share my screen, Kelly, I can't see the rest of the people on the screen of the chat box. But everybody else can see my screen, correct, Brandan? Can you?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes,
So,
we see your screen, and if you should be able to click on chat and it'll pop up for you, but it won't show on your screen for everyone else to see.
That's fine. Okay.
But I'm happy to monitor it for you if you'd like.
I've got the chat too. Yep.
I appreciate that. Thanks. All right. So again, just a little background about Senior Law Center. We have our office in Philadelphia, but we also have physical offices in the other additional counties, Bucks County, Delaware County, Chester County, and Montgomery County. Yes, we are working virtually, and some of our offices may actually change their addresses, but we were very happy in the last 4 years with this new VOCA grant to open up these other physical offices. And we have some of the team members from those offices in the audience today. So we're happy they're here. Again, you know, we were established in 1978. We serve about 5,000 seniors each year. We do a lot of different things from direct representation to advice, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. All right. So, and then this is just the ways to contact us. So, right. So if you have a specific question that we might have some expertise in, please feel free to reach out. Again, we service all counties in Pennsylvania. So if a senior 60 and older has a legal question, they can call our helpline. We don't ask about immigration status or income, but we give some brief advice to any person in any county. So we often will have clients call from Leah County or other counties, and we try to give some advice. And if we think it's appropriate for your agency, then we make the appropriate referral. Great. All right, so what do we know about Pennsylvania, right? So Pennsylvania, everybody is getting older, and that is true nationwide, right? They say basically in 2035, 78 million people will be 65 and older, which is the first time that seniors will be a larger group than people under the age of 18. So unfortunately, Senior Law Center and those who help seniors will be unfortunately very busy in the years to come. All right, so what are we looking for and what are we seeing? So this presentation is going to focus on financial exploitation, but as most of my team can tell you, we're seeing a lot of physical abuse of seniors. So if you go to Philadelphia Family Court on any given day, and unfortunately we're probably going to go back in person soon, a large majority of the petitioners for PFA court will be seniors. So it's sort of a myth that, you know, they're not victims anymore, or that, you know, seniors aren't abusers, because we have multiple cases where both the victim and the abuser are also seniors. So this is true both in physical abuse cases and financial abuse cases. Essentially, you know, probably 1 in 44 cases ever come to light. You know, we talked last year probably about some of the dynamics, but most of it is because of the isolation that most of our seniors have. That really they don't have a lot of family members they can trust, and that there are other either language barriers or disabilities or other things about why they never report the abuse that they're facing. Okay, so again, we're going to talk about a little bit of the financial exploitation that we are seeing, right? So identity theft, unauthorized withdrawals from bank accounts, power of attorney abuse, which Brandan will talk about in more detail, fraudulent deed transfers, which is a big issue in Philadelphia. So many of my staff are looking at sort of quiet title issues where essentially the scammer is forging deeds. There's a ring that was arrested recently, but it is unfortunately very, very common. And the scams. So we'll certainly talk about scams, and they certainly are on the rise today. All right, so I'm not talking the whole time. I wanted to show a little video clip since we have an hour and a half to talk about these issues. So hopefully you can hear this video. Nope, it's one doing something else. Let's see.
Searching for a sweetheart, finding a swindler. Tonight, 9 is on your side with how scammers are trolling legitimate online dating sites. One person took a Westchester woman for $70,000. 9 on your side anchor Julia O'Neill joins us now with her warning for your loved ones.
Psychologists will tell us we have a profound need to feel loved. That was the weapon formed against a kind and caring Westchester woman who went looking for love on an online dating site and found a louse. My darling, I want to let you know that my love for you is burning very brightly this day. Marie Johnson reads one of the many messages from a man using this picture and the name Richard Woody. He would say things like, I can't live without you, you're so special. She still lights up when she thinks about who she thought he was. Because nobody else has ever done that. It's heartbreaking. It's devastating for daughter Melissa Sliger, who watched a devoted 60-year-old grandmother get taken in a sweetheart scam.
Probably see at least 3 a month.
Lieutenant David Tiven with Westchester Police is investigating the case that started with the dating site Our Time, which warns of these scams. He started talking to me, and then he's like, well, I'm getting off this site. Can I have your email? We'll talk on email. Emails led to phone calls from the man claiming to live in Dayton, Ohio, in the construction supply business that took him out of the country. He claimed to be in the Philippines when he started asking her for cash to help him get home to her. They took all my money when I went to pay for the materials. Then it was like, well, there's shipping. I don't have any money for shipping. So you sent him money several times? Yes. There was MoneyGram. Another money transfer is Leah. All this after Melissa had warned her mother.
His business website was from Nigeria. We were like, don't send him money. This is a scam.
You think you just wanted to believe it so badly? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. My heart longs for me to feel the love and desire of your gentle touch and kiss. Well, everybody just wants to feel special. It all came to a halt when Melissa got a call from Fifth Third Bank.
And they said, hey, just so you know, your mom got a loan out, and now she's trying to wire it out immediately. It sounds like a sweetheart scam.
A joint owner of the account, Melissa, stopped the $46,000 wire transfer.
Then got bank statements, started combing through them to look for anything suspicious. So extremely large Walmart purchases, extremely large Kroger purchases, like anything you can do, Western Union, MoneyGram, those kind of things. And I looked for other wires or unusual activity on an account.
The person using this picture had taken Melissa's mother for tens of thousands of dollars.
We've had a couple that have ranged into the hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Lieutenant Tiven says Our Time is trying to help.
They're doing some research on their end.
But Tiven says tracking an online predator is tough.
We don't know who the person is because she's never met the person. We don't know if that picture is that person or not. We don't know if the identity is the right name of the person. The IP address, I highly doubt, comes back to the residence where this person lives. It's probably been bounced off so many different servers that by the time it gets to you, you don't know anything. There are no leads.
It's incredibly infuriating, like not knowing who is out there and what they're doing or why they don't care.
They may do this to 100 people a day, and it only takes one for them to be successful.
And they are persistent.
He still wants to keep talking to me and stuff, and it's like, why? I don't understand.
Once they start asking for money, asking for personal information, you cannot lay your guard down.
Looking to love and be loved is a good thing, but, says the man investigating more and more sweetheart scams,
being cynical is not a bad thing.
We thank Marie for sharing her story. We have a link to Our Time's Red Flag page, as well as information on how you can report a scammer right now on WCPO.com.
So one of the reasons, obviously, I'm showing the video is, right, so we see it almost every day. If you ask my team, half of the calls we get are some sort of scam. And so even though we're out doing lots of education, and I'm sure some of you are doing it as well, it's just, it's easier said than done in avoiding the scam. You know, a woman like that in the news, you know, she's lonely and she wants someone to care about her. My brother-in-law, same thing. He gets SSI and he is very lonely and he wants a friend. So he's, you know, the type of person who's going to be more susceptible to these types of scams. So what are some of the new things that the FTC and other agencies are doing, right? So we mentioned this last year and I was hoping to get new statistics, but they didn't have any online. Obviously, they launched this National Auto Fraud Hotline, which you can call. They started the hotline in March and they received over 1,800 calls in a short period of time. So the purpose of this is to, you know, get the information right away and to get referrals and services for the senior victim. So for those who are working in this area, we know that in order to try to get some sort of relief or compensation, right, you should try to report it right away. In some cases, unfortunately, there is no good relief. I have had clients who fell for a car scam, right? They saw an ad for a classic car. They wired money. They wired $15,000 to the perpetrator. The deal was the perpetrator was supposed to ship the car to the client to look at the car. And then if he didn't like it, he'd ship it back, right? As soon as he wired that money, it was gone. He assumed, because the bank said the wire transfer was guaranteed, that meant that the bank would reimburse him even if there was fraud. And that wasn't the case, because he voluntarily agreed to transfer the money. He wasn't able to get any of the money back because him and his wife have too much money to be able to qualify for any type of VCAP award or anything like that. The money was already gone from the bank account that it was sent to. And there was really not good options for this senior to try to get any type of relief. So again, you may not have the time to work through all the steps with your senior, but to make sure you refer them to this hotline so that you could focus perhaps on some of the legal remedies they may be for your senior.
Excuse me, Leah, we have a question from Angela in the chat.
Sure.
Could it increase these cases?
I'm sorry?
We have a question from Angela in the chat, and her question is, did COVID increase these cases?
Yes. So actually, we're gonna talk in a couple more slides. So just if you hold on for a moment, we're gonna get there in 1 minute, Angela. Right? So so I'm gonna actually launch through a couple statistics that we're gonna talk to. So one of the other things that they did launch in October of last year was reportfraud.ftc. So it's very similar to identitytheft.gov. But again, this is another website where victims can go and try to get up a game plan in order to try to get some information. So one of the next thing, and the other thing that is in effect, and it's actually been in existence for a long period of time, is this Consumer Sentinel Network, which is essentially a database where law enforcement and other agencies can provide information. So the Better Business Bureau, the FTC, the Attorney General's office, they can give statistics. So the next things are going to talk about some statistics about fraud, and one of the slides will also be COVID-19. Right? All right, so scams. So if you take a look at some of the cases of scams and how it's risen so exponentially, right? So again, even though there's a lot more news articles and education out there, people are still falling for these scams. So these reports are sort of any type of consumer complaints. So it ranges from identity theft to fraud to some other consumer issues. So the next slide is, here are the top 10 fraud categories in 2020. Imposter scams is still #1, right? Online shopping, which is still something we were talking to a client just the other day who said they got a text message saying, you want to be an online shopper. She was sent a check. Luckily, she didn't cash the check and send any money to the scammer. But again, despite all the information out there, it's still something that is being highly reported this year. So even though younger people are reporting more often that they are victims of fraud, seniors who are 70, 79, or seniors in general, they have a much higher median of loss, right? So our clients sometimes have more savings, so there's more money, unfortunately, to lose. And then I just wanted to do quickly, again, credit card is really the biggest type of loss for this year, and it keeps going. Even the cryptocurrency, unfortunately, is becoming a new thing. So here are the different types of ways that people are losing money. So credit cards. So when you look at this, you think, why shouldn't the credit cards be doing more to try to educate consumers or to protect consumers? And so that's sort of some of the advocacy issues that we're sort of looking at of really who needs to be involved in trying to stop some of these issues. Okay, so Angela, coming up to your thing. So according to the AARP, and a lot of this is from these statistics from the Sentinel, that the FTC has logged about 369,000 consumer complaints related to COVID-19 scams. So some of the scams that we've seen is, vaccines and vitamins, right? So we've seen those types of things. We've seen stimulus check type issues. those types of things that are going on. So unfortunately, predators are taking advantage of everything, even the pandemic, right? It sort of leads me to the next thing, right? So President signed a new bill, that's a COVID-19 Consumer Protection Act, that basically says that it's unlawful to be deceptive in essentially giving information about medicines that will cure or treat COVID-19, right? So sort of as we learned, there's no vitamin or anything else, right? That's the whole point of the vaccine. However, despite that, there are millions of predators sort of out there who are trying to take advantage of seniors and misinformation, right? So the first litigation that was filed by the FTC was just filed 2 months ago against this Eric Naputi. So he is a chiropractor who was essentially for years and years and years sort of peddled these vitamin D supplements in his company. And now he's sort of saying, well, not only are they have health benefits, but they can also treat COVID-19, and they're actually better than the vaccines, which obviously, you know, it's my opinion that I think that's dangerous to say, right? So, you know, essentially he has no backing on what he's saying, but he's saying it anyway, right? Because he wants to sell his product. So in their complaint, they're asking for an injunction. I didn't get a chance to look up what the status is. I don't know that the court has ruled on any type of injunction yet. And this morning before the presentation, I actually looked on YouTube and I found Mr. Naputi. So Mr. Naputi is a chiropractor. Of course, he's calling himself doctor, right? So if you're selling yourself as a doctor and you're doing that online, that's pretty deceptive, because if you're someone saying you're a doctor and you're trying to peddle some vitamins, then people think that you're a medical doctor, and that's actually not the case. So even today I went online and there are dozens and dozens of YouTube videos of him trying to sell his stuff. This last one, America's Mom, the host basically said, you know, we're so happy that this doctor can join us to tell us about these vitamins that he's saying for our freedom. And it's a shame that that the court isn't acting more quickly to try to stop some of these types of deceptive practices. So I found that very interesting. So if you're curious, when you get a chance, you should look them up. You know, so Facebook did take down one of his video web pages that he has, but unfortunately he keeps on posting new videos or web pages, you know, and so it's going to be interesting to see again the interplay between Facebook in the future and what their role is in trying to protect consumers from some of these scams that are going on. Great. All right. So one of the other issues that we're seeing, and I think some of my colleagues are on here who've had some of these issues up front, is sort of the stimulus check fraud, right? So a couple of issues, right? So physical check is stolen from their home or your mail, and the signature is forged either by a family member, friend, or a stranger, something that we've seen. Another person, family member, claims you as a dependent on your taxes, and then they're sent the stimulus payment, right? So we're saying in these situations where the senior is fine and shouldn't be deemed as a dependent, is living on their own and really needs that money, and they were unaware that someone else has claimed them as a defendant. And we also have another case where the stimulus payment was deposited in an account set up by a family member, where they filled out a taxes for a senior in 2017 and set up an account that they were aware of, but now the senior was unaware of it. So when the stimulus payments were sent, they were deposited in this account, and he has no idea who was responsible. And so we're trying to track that down and figuring out what some of these remedies are. So these are some new issues. So, you know, if people have seen some of these things and have some creative solutions about what to do, you know, we're trying to sort of brainstorm about some of the actions that we want to try to take to try to solve the problem. So in terms of the stimulus check, I'm not going to go through all of it, but it basically is trying to go through the IRS to try to figure out, A, was the check cashed? And if it wasn't cashed, you may be able to get a rebate. The problem is the time has already passed for trying to get a rebate for the first and second payment. So say you were sent the first payment by check, but it was stolen, didn't report it right away, and it's past the deadline for the taxes for last year, you can't get any credit from the IRS. So the question is whether or not, if we believe that was stolen, can we then file for a victim's compensation claim? Or if we're able to track down who stole it, then suing the perpetrator for conversion of the funds or something like that. Again, this is just information about tips about how to fill out the forms when you need to. I'm not going to go through it in detail now, but some of these are just practice tips if this happens and what you need to do in terms of trying to get the IRS to cooperate, which many of my staff can tell you is very frustrating. So if you call on the phone, you'll be on the phone for hours. If you're trying to get information about the check, it takes a long time, and the process itself takes a long time. But I want to at least provide the steps here. So if you need it, you can look back to it. And then if you need to fill out the form, you need to basically say that you want to trace the check, then you would send it or fax it to the Philadelphia location for the IRS.
I'm sorry, if I could just interrupt. This is Kelly. I'm going to launch the first of the CLE poll boxes. Attorneys requesting CLE credit, please respond now. You have 2 minutes to do so, and the presenters don't need to respond. You can just click off of the box. Thank you. And please continue when you're ready.
Great, thanks. Oops. Okay, so just again, sort of what I said. So what are some of the things that we're going to be able to do? Someone else in the family claim the senior as a dependent when they shouldn't have been, or the payments were deposited in an account for someone that you no longer trust, right? So first we would send a demand letter to that person and try to get them to give the senior the money back. And then we have to consider any lawsuit for unjust enrichment or conversion, depending on the facts of your case. So each of them are fact specific. And then we have to weigh our resources, right? So it's a $1,500 check. You know, where are we going to sue? We're going to sue in small claims, or we're going to sue in the court of common pleas, and what can we do and how effective they are. So these are ongoing issues. So if anyone has any other suggestions or things that they've done, please feel free to share it in the chat or unmute yourself as well. Okay, so most of you know this from last year, but we're gonna go through it for those who haven't. So what are some of the things that we tell our seniors who are victims of financial exploitation, right? So no matter what it is, whether it's a family member or caregiver or a stranger scam, you need to file a police report right away, and it's good to get a DC number and try to get a copy of the report. Again, as those who are familiar with filing for VCAP, which is victims compensation, you have to do it within a very short amount of time. I believe it's now 72 hours. And if you don't do it, you have to show good cause why you didn't do it. If it's any type of fraud through a debit or credit card, obviously you notify the bank or the credit card company right away, right? So I see there's a typo there again. It's whether or not you can file a VCAP claim or some other relief. If the senior gave the PIN number. So oftentimes we have situations where our senior is asking their relative to go to the store, gives them the debit card with the PIN number. The person, supposed to take out $20, takes out $200, and then the bank says, too bad, you shared your funds. You shared your personal information, your banking information, and we're not going to give you back your money. So then we have to figure out what other options that we have there. Close all your bank accounts if you provided your personal information to someone, or you're a victim of a scam. Open up new accounts at another bank. Notify payers of direct deposits. So it's not easy, right? It's not easier for our seniors. If you close your account, then you have to notify Social Security, waiting online call and talk to someone from Social Security, and then the delay in getting your Social Security check or your pension, that takes a lot of time. You know, changing your automatic debit payments to a new account as well. And then if you're concerned that there's other exploitation, trying to order bank statements for any periods that you're concerned about, right? And then obviously one of the other important things, if it's abuse of a power of attorney, to make sure they revoke the power of attorney to the perpetrator, right? So those seem pretty straightforward to us as a young person, right? If you say, all right, you got to go to the bank and close the accounts, yes, it seems like a pain, but you can certainly do that fairly easily. For our seniors, it's not so easy. I know you can't see this very well, but for our seniors, right? So some of the reasons that they don't report it to the police, right? They don't report it because they're embarrassed, they're victimized by someone, especially when they're family members, and they don't want you know, the perpetrator facing any criminal charges. So that's oftentimes why a lot of our seniors don't report, especially when it deals with a family member, right? Notify bank of unauthorized use and confirm it in writing. Okay, senior never notifies bank because the perpetrator says he or she will pay the money back, and senior's afraid will bank report to the police and the perpetrator will get in trouble. Yeah. Close the accounts and open a new account. Senior does not have assistance to physically go to the bank to close and change bank accounts. Some of our seniors don't have any information of their accounts. Some of them even not sure where their banks, you know, where the bank is. So those are some of the issues that we're dealing with some of the time. Opening a new bank account, right? So senior doesn't have assistance to physically go to the bank to close the bank account, and doesn't have enough money to open a new account in a new bank. In some cases, the perpetrator steals senior's ID and unable to open a new account without one, right? So when senior loses their ID, you know, it's not easy for them to try to get a replacement. So those are sort of some of the issues that our clients are dealing with, which makes it difficult for them to address their exploitation. And sometimes it's just enough of a barrier for them not to do so at all.
Yeah, this is Kelly. I'm not sure if you have like notification boxes or something that are popping up on your screen, but at the top of the screen there keeps being a dark box that disappears and then pops up again. Yeah, a bigger one just appeared. I don't know if you did anything or clicked anything. So sometimes we can't see the top of the slide. And oh, now you're on mute.
To me, that's my bar just to have showing the video and the participants. So I'm not sure where that moved.
Now it moved to the bottom. There's a
All right,
box.
so let me move it back to the top. I don't know how to get it out of the way. All right, so now Brennan, it's all you. So if Kelly, if you can keep an eye on the chat, that would be helpful. Yeah. Did any questions about some of the information that we went through? No? Okay, Brennan?
Yeah, there is a comment and a question that's popped
Sure.
up.
Yeah.
So one is about someone, I think it's Angela, saying my house insurance, State Farm now gives the option that is a minimal fee to have someone help with identity fraud if it happens to you. So I don't know if you wanted to touch briefly on the issue with homeowners insurance or rental insurance, and you know, sort of VCAPing the payer of last resort, and that this is not something that's always available to our clients.
Absolutely, right. So in Philadelphia, lots of our seniors own their homes. However, so a couple issues. So, however, most of them can barely afford their taxes and they let their homeowners insurance lapse. So a lot of our seniors don't have homeowners insurance. If they do, hopefully that may cover some of the fraud issues, but oftentimes it won't. Same idea about renters insurance, right? I rented for many years. I never had renters insurance. So for those who are familiar with the VCAP, which is the Crime Victims Fund from PCCD, right? So in order to be eligible for VCAP, you have to essentially say whether or not you have a homeowner's insurance policy or a renter's insurance policy that may cover some of your losses. For some of you who don't know about the fund, right, it's limited what you can get. So even if you lose $5,000, but your Social Security and pension is only $2,000, then that's the most you're going to be able to get. So that's why for us, and Brandan, you can also comment, for us, it's education and prevention is the biggest thing we can do because recovery is difficult. For those of you who do consumer work, either on either side, and we know from our team is, so even if, you know, your client is a victim and loses, you know, $20,000 and gets a judgment, doesn't mean the perpetrator is going to pay that, right? So it's these terrible things happen, but there's often not very good relief at the end of the day. So my team is struggling with how to be creative with trying to get as much of a relief as possible. So sometimes it is, you know, settling with a perpetrator to pay in a payment arrangement of, you know, $500 a month until they pay off the, you know, $30,000. That may never come to fruition, but at least they're paying something, right? And then if they sign some sort of promissory note or some other agreement and they breach that agreement, then you have recourse in court of common pleas to sue them for, you know, essentially breaching that agreement to pay that loan or any installment that you had them sign.
And Leah, Marilyn is asking, is racial discrimination also a factor in seniors not contacting police?
Absolutely. So there are numerous different issues. So a lot of it that we see in our team is distrust of the police. So if one of the first things we tell people is to report it to the police and they don't trust the police, then certainly they're not going to do that because of various different reasons, and some of that is racial, right? So absolutely.
And Isabel is asking, related to the previous slide, many of the most common types of fraud for elderly people are related to online services and social media. And she asks, is internet literacy for the elderly a common method to help them prevent fraud?
Absolutely, that's a great idea. So, right, so Brandan and I were just having this discussion with some other people the other day. Is seniors today and seniors, you know, a while back are not the same. So yes, we have a population of our seniors who are not tech savvy, right? So they're more susceptible to these scams where, right, so you have some pop up from your computer that says, you know, you have a virus, and if you don't pay right away, you know, you're going to have problems, right? But then we have a growing population of seniors who are more tech savvy. So increasing their knowledge of the internet and things like that, absolutely, that's the right way to go. I think we underestimate sometimes our seniors and their ability to sort of understand.
Absolutely, yes, absolutely.
Any more questions before we move on to Brandan's portion?
Okay.
Great, Brandan, why don't you get started and then we'll take some more time after.
Well, one more thing I went to ask earlier, you had mentioned Facebook taking down one of the chiropractor scammers pages. Isn't deceptive information also against YouTube's community guidelines that they could get, so that they could get involved, YouTube?
Right, so that's what I sort of raised in terms of, right? So all these online providers, YouTube, Facebook, anything else where you can essentially advertise or reach a large amount of people, right? They have some responsibilities, right? So the problem is it's overwhelming, right? So how many YouTube videos do you need to see in a day? It's pretty overwhelming. I didn't realize Facebook kind of had so many videos, but I should know. I'm just a little bit old, I guess. I don't know. But it's right. How do you track it? Because once you take something down, you know, it comes up again. And so I guess you could ban certain people, but that's, again, you're getting to sort of other First Amendment sort of sticky kind of rights. So I don't know a lot of the answers, but certainly the FTC and the courts really have to do a lot more intervention in these types of scenarios where, because of how easy it is to get out their messages nowadays, there has to be better standards.
Great. Anything else before I move on? Again, please feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question. That's more than welcome. So this is actually a good transition based on some of the questions and ending points that we were just looking at. because a few things I would like to say as a preface about what we consider, the abuse of older adults. First of all, older, elderly, senior, these terms, what do they mean? What did they mean? It's very important, I find, not to think of this as a monolith, right? It's not a group of people, it's individuals, right? And they face different challenges in terms of how they respond. It's also about abuse, which it doesn't matter what age you are. Part of abuse is trauma, and it's traumatic enough to endure it, and it can be even more traumatic to have to sort of relive it or speak about it to a stranger. There's a lot going on there. So it's also about relationships. So Leah was talking a lot about these sort of stranger scams, but how do they work? They work by somebody creating a relationship, right? So that's sort of the dynamic of abuse. I lure you in, I reel you in, and now basically you'll do whatever I say, whether it's out of a belief of love or fear or loyalty or whatever it may be. So even the stranger scam, like a shopping online scam, is still a relationship. We've chosen you to be our online shopper, right? So you're always experiencing this. Now, what we're going to talk about in this case scenario, it is also about a relationship. And one of the things that's important, I think, to keep in mind, we think about scams and we think about online scams and stranger scams, but actually the most prevalent abuser of an adult over 60 is their own adult child. So again, we have a lot of stereotypes. So we've dealt with clients who were maybe in their 90s, and the abusive older child is in their 60s, right? So it's not what we think. It's about families, it's about relationships. And that's a special thing we have to consider when we're working with our clients, right? Because it's not about a legal issue for them. It's their life, it's their family, it's their relationships, it's their shame, their fear, all of these things. And this is all of these things were sort of present in Roger's case, although Roger decided to fight. So Roger had 3 children. You can see he lost his wife. They'd been married about 60 years. He was feeling very vulnerable and anxious about his future. The family had been very close. One of the daughters was a social worker, and she told her father, "Why don't you name me as an agent, right, under power of attorney? And I can help you manage things, right? I'll make sure that everything's going. I know you have a lot on your mind. This transition, mom's just died." It seemed very good. No one had any reason to think she would ever do anything untoward. Roger and Samantha, as he had with his other daughters, they had a very strong relationship, right? So he didn't really ask any questions. He didn't really follow or monitor what was doing. The bills were being paid, he assumed, right? Well, about 3 years later, he was arrested. Samantha. It was a very, very serious crime, charged with a very serious crime. And she had been out of communication with her family for a while and her father. So they were a little worried about her. But she posted her bail by using her father's money without his knowledge or consent. So they found this out, right, when they were trying to find out where she is. And unfortunately, Pandora's box was open. That was just the tip of the iceberg. All right, so we go to the next slide. Do I have control, Leah?
No, I got it.
Okay, great. All right, so, one of the things I'd like to ask you to think about is, of course, we're going to look at capacity issues, right? That could be a whole 3-hour or 4-day discussion. But some of the things that we would do immediately, right, if we knew that the client had the capacity, was, we would advise the client to revoke a POA, right? Changing will, that's an issue, right? Because very often the abuser or the bad actor is in the will, and also to provide those copies to medical and financial providers, right? So that everybody knows that this person who previously had this power under as power of attorney is not any longer. And then you want to start looking at your own investigation of the accounts, right? So, here you have a client who's in deep grief. He's shocked by this, right? It's another loss. It's hard for him to wrap his head around that his daughter would do this to him. He's, sort of befuddled. Doesn't know where to start. So, one of the things you have to do is then begin to help him and conduct your own investigation. Let's get the bank records, let's get the statements, let's start to look at things. Next slide. So we did that in this case, and it was, it was a bit of work. I kind of enjoy it because I want to be detective, but it's a lot of work. And luckily, another family member was incredibly helpful in this. With this, we went through probably 300 or 400 pages of documents and statements, and we found that Samantha had taken at least 250,000 that we knew of. So what would be the next steps, right? So if anybody has any, someone's asking what any of this is in, I can't comment. And someone's asking what if the terms of the POA, it was in this case, it was a valid POA. Someone's saying if there's an unlimited gifting in the POA in my jurisdiction, the police won't do anything. Police generally won't do anything anyway. Most you can do is report to IRS for fraud. That's someone saying that. Well, there are other things. We can go to the next slide, and I'll tell you what happened in this case. So you also can have the client file a criminal complaint in the system of that, right? If what's happened may rise to the level of a crime, or if you believe it, right? So you have fraud, you have all kinds of civil fraud, there's criminal fraud. The first thing you're going to do though is you want to get the facts and you want to give her the opportunity to respond. So you send formal demand letters to Samantha, right, saying as a former agent under power of attorney, you're demanding an accounting from such and such a date. So you send those letters, right, and then you hear nothing back. You send them certified mail. They don't accept them, right? They come back, no such certificate, no such resident. What do you do now? Okay, so the next slide. So you're going to go back and, what we did is let's go back and look at the statute, very closely and see what the duties are. So obviously I'm not going to read this. Many of you are very familiar with this statute. But you can go to the next one, right? You're talking about, what are their duties under power of attorney? So this is particularly relevant. Disclosure of receipts, disbursements, or transactions, right? So in general, okay, an agent under power of attorney is not required to disclose receipts or disbursements or transactions, related to any financial expenditures made on behalf of the principal, unless a court orders it, right? Or requested by the principal. So here, the principal, through his attorneys, was requesting such an accounting, okay? Next slide. Okay, and then within 30 days, they're supposed to request or provide a writing, right? Or give some record why they need additional time, right? And then clock starts ticking again. So the next slide. Here what happened was, again, this is important, right? So an agent should file an account of his administration whenever directed to do so. We just sort of went through that. And can file an account at any time, right? Next slide. This talks about where it must be filed and sort of what the court can do with that filing. So this is giving you a sense of, okay, as you're strategizing, what are we going to do to give this client some relief or make him whole to some extent, right? We're looking ahead, okay, this is what could happen. The next slide. And of course, these things have to be filed, I'm sure you know, in orphans courts, Pennsylvania and its orphans court, thanks to its English common law origin. So we have orphans courts, as you know, and that's where the jurisdiction is exercised over these kinds of matters. So even if you were to sue, let's say we were going to sue the agent for civil fraud or civil theft, right? It's going to get kicked out more than likely, and tell you to refile in the orphans court. So once you establish orphans court jurisdiction, anything related to that matter, the court will be able to hear, exercise jurisdiction over. Just the website there. Okay, the next slide. All right. And so what kinds of things are you going to have to put there? Again, some of you may be very familiar with this, but I have found my own experience. Orphans court is a land of its own, right? So it's sort of like Wonderland. Nothing is exactly what it seems, and it's sort of like regular, normal court, but it isn't exactly. Also, local rules. I mean, I know we all know this, and we all do this, but local rules for orphans court can vary dramatically from county to county. And it's really important procedurally that you understand the rules, the local rules, okay? Some of it's like hop 3 times and turn around, right? But if you don't do that, you're not going forward with the case. So that's always a best practice for us, is double check the Pennsylvania Orphans Court rules and then triple check the local rules. Next slide. And again, I'm not going to read through the slide. This is basically giving you an overview, right? You can look at the statute and find exactly, or the rules, Pennsylvania Orphans Court rules and your local rules to find out if any additional requirements are needed. But generally, you know, this is what it is, right? Okay, so I think you all can read that. You have to attach a copy of the writing. It's not accessible. You have to identify the reason and sort of set forth the substance of the writing, okay? You know, if it's an oral agreement, you have to sort of set forth, summarize the terms of that oral agreement. Next slide, please. All right, and then citation practice. Again, I'm sure many of you could teach us a lot about this, but if you're not familiar with Orphans Court, you don't practice there. Citation, you know, the vocabulary is different in Orphans Court, right? We have principals, we have agents, we have citation, we have citation shall be issued as to why not. So basically serves as a, you know, order to show cause, but it's not called that. And these are some of the things that have to happen. Note here, I think this is important. Philadelphia, if you're practicing in Philadelphia or maybe some of the other counties with bigger cities or, you know, more progressive sports technology, you know, you have electronic filing. In Philadelphia, it's pretty simple. I've done it there. Not all counties do. Right? And then so you have to be very aware of that. And so, you know, if you can serve the original process by electronic means in one county without any issue, there may be another county which requires that it's agreed to by the respondents, right? So that can become important too if they're, you know, unrepresented parties or all of that. But this is all, procedure is everything when you're trying to go forward with this kind of a case. Okay, and the next issue would be, okay, the notice, right? You have to deal with issues of jurisdiction. It can usually be straightforward, but sometimes you may actually, as we have done and did do in this case later down the road, you know, we have to make an argument about why jurisdiction is proper, right? And why this court should hear this matter relating to things that may not have actually happened in that county, right? Was certificate of service. Okay. Please jump in with questions if you have any. Okay, so after we filed the petition, we did the accounting, we went through the Orphans Court rules. You know, we had some bumpy patches, you know, because we didn't cross a T here, dot an I, so we had to sort of go back and do that. It's an interesting and educational experience. It was not in Philadelphia, that's all I can tell you. So what should you also consider filing when you find out this? You find out that the daughter is selling her home. Remember, she's facing criminal charges, and now she's selling her home, which ostensibly is the only asset she has. We don't know, but it's certainly an asset, and it could actually represent our client's last best chance to get anything back, right? Because if she sells the home and money, it takes the money and is gone, you know, what is there going to be at the end of the road? So does anybody have any ideas about what you might consider doing or filing here? Lease pendants, says Brian. Okay. Anything else? Now with the lease pendants, the issue of course is that the action has to be arise out of real property, right? So it's a question of title, really, who has the title or who has the right or an interest in the property. So that can be sticky. Next slide. So yes, these pendants for sure, this injunction, right? You can go through, these are some of the things, sequestration, filing of accounts, discovery of information, right? These are all things that you can do in civil and orphans court. And if these pendants is appropriate, yes, the orphans court can and approve that, and criminal court, right? See what we can do. So what we had to do in this case, because actually, just to back up, we didn't really find out about the house being for sale until we were actually a little further down the road, and we had a first hearing about something else. But why did that hearing happen? Because we filed a petition for emergency injunctive relief, which is, of course, extraordinary. And, you know, I mean, it's extraordinary relief. He has a brilliant idea. We weren't sure if it would work. We had to sort of make the argument, submit a brief. But the court set a hearing date. And so for the first time in almost 2 years, the agent, Brand's daughter, responded. And we went to court, and we did not know whether or not she would appear. She did appear with counsel. And at that time, we learned that the house had been sold. So, okay, whether, you know, not only that it was for sale, but that it had been sold. What did we do? Here's what happened there. Yeah, the next slide. So what happened in that particular case is we then made the argument, right, that since no accounting had been provided, that the money should be held in escrow and that we should hold the money in escrow. And, you know, it was a bit of a stretch. We argued it, we had written the brief, and right there, we were granted that. So we actually were holding the proceeds of the house. This was about to close the next day or 2 days later. So the judge ordered that, you know, the statement of sale and all of the closing papers be sent to us immediately. So we were holding the proceeds from that sale in escrow for our client. So at least we were able to freeze that to stop that from happening. Of course, our lawyer argued vigorously against that. You also can advocate for criminal charges, which we have been doing in this case, as well. So these are some of the things, right, that you can file for criminal complaints in. Because yes, generally, as someone mentioned, law enforcement, also in cases of physical abuse, unfortunately, to a large extent, there's not much they're going to do or are able to do. So we always instruct our clients, if we feel it's appropriate, to file a private criminal complaint. And, you know, in the outer counties, that's the lower court, the district magisterial court. In the bigger cities like Philadelphia, there's a municipal court. That's where you would, you know, put pressure on the bad actor and let them know you're not going away. Because I started saying that this is about relationships, right? So that is what starts to happen. You saw it here, but it sort of went a different route. It is, you know, Sophie's choice. I mean, which, you know, do I try to put my own child in jail? And yet my child is stolen from me, right? And whether the child is 60 or 30 or 15 or 20, that's really, you know, I can't imagine. I don't have children myself. So it's always going to be about the relationship. And this client was devastated. I mean, we went to his home several times just to talk and listen. Because yes, I can get the facts. Yes, I can sort of make the legal arguments. Yes, we put together a strategy. But number one is what he wants to do, right? What does he want to do? It's his life. And, you know, you have to be always careful that you're not putting your agenda forward. Like, we got to get this back, right? So we talked about these things, and the client went ahead and did this, filed. So there are investigations that did happen that are, you know, and we thought that was a good thing. And next. So this, so in Roger's case, I think the point is that, as I started, it's about the relationship, right? And it took a while for Roger to come to terms with what was happening. So as a lawyer, you know, we have deadline, we're going to do this, we want to get this done, let's do this right away. And it's difficult because, again, financial exploitation is a form of abuse. It's based on, you know, an abusive relationship. It's based on someone controlling someone else, whatever reason. So it's difficult. And that leads us into sort of some of the other things that we have to consider when we're working with, you know, older adults. You can read some of these things here, right? Capacity, which we touched on, again, it's a slippery slope, right? Who's to say what's the, what there's the legal definition? We're not doctors, but all of you deal with this every day. I'm sure if you're working with some clients who have questions about their capacity, but there is dangers of delays, right? Especially if the victim is frail or elderly, and Leah mentioned preserving assets. It's not always as easy as it is, right? So some clients can do their banking online and no problem, yeah, take care of that. Others, there are so many barriers between them and even being able to do something like changing their bank account. So here, this is, we can, if there's criminal cases, there could be a seizure of assets, there could be restitution in a criminal case, lots can happen. Then you have to sort of consider an older person as a witness, right? And I don't think anyone will be surprised, but there's a lot of prejudice, there's a lot of bias against what society perceives as the elderly, right? I still don't know what that means. Certainly today's population over 60 is not the population over 60 that I knew when I was a child, right? So it's a different world, it's a different group, it's a very diverse group, we've touched on that. But there's a prejudice, right? There's a sense that, they don't remember, they don't know, they're not good witnesses. And so you have to sort of deal with that. And also the trauma that's happening, right? There's an assumption that, older people, like they don't lack credibility, they can't be relied on, they don't remember what they had for dinner yesterday. Well, folks, neither do I. Some of you may not. That's not the issue, right? The issue is whether or not they can credibly tell their story. And of course, the clients that we have can, and if they can't or it's difficult, we look at that and see if there's something we can do to assist that or whatever that is. There's an assumption everybody has dementia, which is another umbrella term, right? I'm sure many of you do know the difference between there's different types of dementia, that Alzheimer's is not dementia, right? There's this assumption, and I see this almost every week in PFA court, not in Philadelphia, elsewhere, and may happen in Philadelphia and other cities across the Commonwealth. Immediately, they say that the person has dementia. So PFA cases, that's all imagination. She imagined all of that. None of that happened. He has dementia. He couldn't remember where his car was parked yesterday. So we can't believe anything that he's put into this petition. It's a big barrier, right? And of course, there are some studies that contradict that, right? So some studies say that even with dementia or some form of dementia or Alzheimer's, they have a better recall of traumatic events than non-traumatic events, right? So different parts of the brain, and we're dealing with trauma. So if the consent is a defense, then, they could look for a psychological evaluation of the victim, or we can, right, before writing off the case. But it rears its ugly head a lot. Just because, you turn 60 or happen to have a birthday that's older than 60, you start, what we do as a society, and I think I'm speaking about my own experience as well, as we infantilize these people, right? We infantilize and we make them a monolith. So I think these are some of the actual things you can do, but from a bigger picture or a bigger perspective, I think it's really important to remember that each person, like any other client, right? Each client is an individual, right? With a story, the life, and the perspective, and an experience, and brings all kinds of strengths, and may also bring some challenges. But there still is this idea about old people, they're over there. So I just wanted to point that out. Okay, and the next slide.
So before we, let's actually take questions. I'm going to stop share because the way I shared my screen, I can't see anybody. I don't like that. So this is just a little bit about what we do, which is a lot like what you all do. So I'm going to stop share so I can see everybody. Oh,
there you go.
All right. So I know we're early, but I'd like to at least talk a little bit more about what you may be seeing in your age Certainly we can fill up at least another 10 minutes with some of the stories that we're seeing. So I guess the first question is there other scams or frauds that you are finding in your area that you're dealing with? Some of the things that we haven't addressed here, but we see, which I always think is certainly fraud, is car dealerships, right? I hate car dealerships cases because so many is deceptive practices. I have a client that unfortunately referred to a private attorney to sue for punitive damages for a car dealership where 89 years old, her only income essentially is Social Security. She can't even pay her mortgage payments. And somehow she went to a car dealership, saw an ad, went to a car dealership for a lease, for a low lease, which she couldn't afford anyway, but she did. She went by herself without anyone to help her. And got talked into not getting a lease, but actually buying a brand new, like 2020 Kia, whatever, right? So $35,000 car, which my client clearly can't afford in any way, shape, or form, right? And they're gonna say they've done nothing wrong because she signed the papers and all of those things. And so, there's so many consumer issues out there that are so close to being just fraudulent on its face, right? No one should ever have given her at 89 years old a $30,000 car. I mean, it's crazy. So I'm still keeping an eye on the case. The private attorney had agreed to take it. Hopefully she's gonna, she did return the car and hopefully she gets some money out of it. But because we were assisting and my name was attached, I'm actually seeing some of the correspondence between the car dealership and the Attorney General's office. And of course, again, they claim, they're innocent and they're just trying to help her out, right? And that's certainly not the case. Let me see, there's a comment there. My grandmother was scammed multiple times by calls claiming her grandson was in prison or some other trouble. They knew her family members' names and they used that against her to have her wire money for bail or other trouble. Absolutely. So, right, it happens all the time. My own mother, even though I'm a lawyer, was a victim of a similar grandparent scam, right? She got a phone call from someone saying, one of your grandchildren was in an accident and in the hospital. If you don't send us money right away, they won't get the operation. Story doesn't make sense in any shape, way, shape, or form, right? She has multiple children. She has a daughter who's a lawyer. Does she call any of us? No. What she does is she goes to Walmart, like they say, gets, $4,000 in Walmart gift cards, calls the scammer back, gives that information to the scammer, and that money is absolutely gone, right? She would have done it again because they thought, oh, this is easy, we'll try it again. So they contacted her again and would have given more money, but she actually did go to her local bank that she's gone to for about 40 years. And they said to her, hey, I think this is a scam. So luckily we had the teller who says that, right? So there are more advocacy for financial institutions to do that, to intervene, but there are still multiple stories where these same types of things happen. People who've never transferred money are coming in to transfer money and the bank teller says, are you sure this isn't a scam? Maybe you should hold off on doing that or call a lawyer or check somebody else, right? That's what they should be doing, not just sort of closing their eyes and saying, okay, you want us to wire the $15,000 out of your life savings? That's fine. In my mother's case, I didn't realize that, a year later, she was actually diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And so that might have contributed to some of it. But sort of that is also a situation that a lot of our clients are in. They have some dementia or other incapacity, but still living on their own and on a spectrum somewhere. And so it's more susceptible that some of these things happen. Other instances that people want to share of scams they've seen in their area, other things that they've been trying to do and trying to address some of these issues. Right, so in a lot of these issues, right, we are advocating for criminal charges, which we think is the right thing. The problem is sometimes when we advocate for criminal charges is it stays the civil action, right? So I have a case that The scenario essentially is a senior was befriended by someone who acted as her aide, and of course then transferred the property for way less than what the market value of the property is, right? So this referral was actually from the DA's office because they filed criminal charges against the perpetrator aide. But then, of course, they asked for a stay of my civil action for quiet title. And because of the pandemic, it's, you know, the criminal cases were delayed, all the civil cases are delayed. So it's probably been a year and a half, and my case is still on hold. So my client is aging this entire time and her health is getting worse. So she may find relief at the end of this, she may not. Unfortunately, in our agency with our clients, we've unfortunately lost a large number of clients in this last year. Some are in the middle of litigation, some are about to file litigation. And so it is unfortunately our time frame in sort of addressing someone's problems are a little bit different for a younger client.
Leah, this is this is Kelly. I'm going to go ahead and launch the second CLE poll box. And because we were hoping this would be a little more interactive, please for the attendees, please remember that you can unmute yourselves. You can join in the discussion that way, or you can post any questions or comments you have in the chat box. So just a reminder, we like to see what's going on around the state and with other programs and what you're seeing. So it would be really helpful if people could share.
Yeah, one thought I was just having is and this could be a whole, you know, another entire home, but we also see a lot of fraudulent deed transfers, right? Or transfers that didn't happen. So it's also a form of financial exploitation, right? Where someone in the family, not or a stranger, but someone in the family is fraudulently transferring the deed, right? Or somebody dies. So particularly in some, you know, some communities, it's a property that's been in the house for generations. Your grandma's property. There was no mortgage on it. It's been paid for long ago, you know, but when great grandma died, grandma lived there, right? They didn't change the deed. They didn't think to do it. So their family home, they lived there, right? And then right? And she dies intestate, right? And so now it goes to mom, and mom's there. And, you know, then mom's having some other kinds of issues, health-wise or whatever. And, you know, an adult child, the deed to themselves, right? It says sign this. So that's another kind of financial exploitation that, you know, it's a specific type, but that is in a form of abuse. So I don't know if any of you have seen that kind of thing and how you handled it, but that is something we also see a lot of, right? Just sign here, or literally forging documents, right? And so that's another way of exploiting people. You are, you know, taking away their home, literally. And that's happened a lot with family members. Right? And then the family's fighting about it. And if you're talking about someone who owned the home who's deceased, you can end up in orphans court again, right? What's the will? The person died intested, you know, who takes what? And when does the statute kick in? What are the relationships? So that's just something I thought of. So if anybody has anything about that, that's also definitely a piece of financial exploitation.
So there's another question in the chat. Have you ever encountered victims of fraud that in an attempt to keep their sense of autonomy have denied help from agencies that try to assist them in these situations? Absolutely, right? So we represent the senior and only the senior. So sometimes they initially may want to move forward in some sort of litigation against the perpetrator, especially the family member, and then they change their mind, right? They decide it's not worth it. I still want this person in my life, even though they may have stolen, you know, $50,000 from me, or, you know, or sort of taken the house back, but now they're letting me live there. So now I don't want to move forward, right? So, right, it's their choices to make. And as Brandan has alluded to, when it comes to family relations as an exploitation, it's really complicated. For my staff who's on here, and for all those who are representing in PFA cases, right? So an abuser, there's so many family dynamics that's different than other types of litigation. So similar in PFA cases, right? They may have gotten a PFA case, PFA petition and have a temporary order, but at the end of the day, they don't move forward for a final order because they think that their partner or their son or their daughter or someone will change. They just need X, Y, and Z, and then they won't abuse me anymore, right? So yes, that is a common dynamic that we are seeing in our situations.
I also see another dynamic. I have an older couple now filing against their son who have been terrorized by him for years. They were supposed to come in and file their own, but then the mother decided not to. She just wanted the father to file. And so she's leaving the door open. And then what happens is if there's a door left open for one of the parents, then the child will start to destroy their relationship. So it can be very, very destructive. And, you know, I spent a lot of time with clients like that, just to kind of let them know ahead of time that some of the tools the abuser might choose to do to kind of divide and conquer. So I think that's something that you also don't think about. I think years ago there was, you know, again, another parent filed, he was evicted, but then the other parent would let him in during the day to, you know, do their laundry. So, you know, it's really sad. And again, you know, the embarrassment and the anguish of thinking if we'd have been a better parent, he wouldn't be acting this way. So it is sad.
Yeah, that's very classic example of an abused person, right? It's my fault. It's actually my fault, right? It's my fault that this person's doing this to me. You know, I should have done or I should have done. So yeah, we do see that a lot.
And some of the you know, other factors that are often playing into it is mental health or other addictions, right? So they're always interplaying in a lot of our cases. And sometimes our client might say, well, if they just get into rehab or if they just, you know, take their medication, then they'll be fine. And that's really what I want. We've had clients who they just filed a PFA hoping that the PFA court judge would order their son or daughter in rehab. And we have to explain that generally that doesn't happen. Maybe in your county that might happen, but it won't happen in Philadelphia. It's possible it could happen in a different county if there's some sort of agreement, but generally that's not what the PFA court is trying to do. And it's definitely not what the PFA judges in Philadelphia want to try to monitor and track, right? All right. So,
sorry. I've also seen, especially recently, cases of a second marriage where the child that's doing the stealing or running up the credit card, the step parent wants to go after them, and the blood relation says, no, I can't, I won't do it. And it's a problem, but without the testimony of both, you can't really do too much. So that's also an issue I've seen more frequently of late.
So thanks for sharing that. Okay, so for those who aren't familiar with this, the Senior Law Center, again, so our team is doing lots of things that you guys are already doing in your offices. The things that are slightly different, and I'll then answer the question, is we represent landlords, we represent an ejectment actions, and so oftentimes we're filing lawsuits. I realize now when we're responsible for service and other things that it's much easier to defend a lawsuit than file a lawsuit because of service issues and all kinds of other things that happens when you're a plaintiff. But especially in Philadelphia, we have lots of seniors who are landlords. They just do. They have property, or in Philadelphia, it's sort of strange here where essentially if you take money from any person that's ever lived with you, you've now converted into a landlord, even if you didn't necessarily intend to do that. So navigating landlord-tenant court and trying to move forward, especially with a pandemic, with the eviction moratorium, it's been difficult to get relief for many of our clients. Let me see this question from Ashley. Is it common for victims to have other types of victimization by their perpetrators? Sexual, physical, or mental abuse? So absolutely. So, right. So a lot of our clients who are our clients in PFA cases will also say, well, the abuser also stole my debit card or stole some money from me, or I found out later that they opened a bank account without my knowledge. So all of these things are often interplaying and intertwined with each other. So absolutely. I will say when I was at legal services, we didn't handle that. We didn't represent that many PFAs only because we had so many other things coming to the door. And I don't think I ever represented a senior victim. And now that's all we did was represent senior victims. And so the number of cases that we see essentially on a daily basis or weekly basis is pretty it's unthinkable, unfortunately, what some of our seniors are doing. And they should be living their days in dignity. And that's unfortunately not what's happening right now.
Yeah, and I would just point out too, the point in which somebody comes to us, you know, nobody wants to go to the lawyer about this kind of thing, or anybody, but it's not because what happened that day. Like, it's usually years and years and years and years and years. All kinds of abuse, right? And the person doesn't perceive it as abuse, right? Again, that's sort of the dynamic. So sometimes we find out later, right? So they come to us about a particular kind of abuse, financial or physical, and then, you know, later we find out other things. So yeah, let's go hand in hand. You know, if you're an abuser, you're an abuser, right? You can abuse any way you can, any way you think you can, any way you can get away with. You know, there's no boundary, right? You're in control, and that's what you want.
All right, if there's no other questions, I think, you know, 5 minutes always not too bad. Usually Brandan and I talk a lot more, so I was surprised that we got through some of those slides pretty quickly.
It's been a long week. Yeah.
it's been a long week. But again, I encourage you to look up that doctor in that video. He's a chiropractor, not a doctor. And then just spread the word, right, as much as you can. When we talk to our seniors, we try to do a holistic sort of review of some of the legal issues. So if you're talking to a client about a landlord-tenant action and they are not paying the rent, and you ask them why they're not paying your rent, you might find out they're not paying the rent because they're giving it all to, you know, their son or daughter or somebody else. So of how many other financial exploitation instances you might find when they may be calling about something else, a foreclosure problem or a debt collection problem or something. So I hope that you, you know, got something interesting out of what we have. And in the PowerPoint itself, it has Brandan and my contact information. Again, we may not have all the answers for everything they have, but we are a resource. And we're willing to chat with you about your client situation and try to come up with some solutions. Okay.
Thank you so much, Leah and Brandan, for being with us today, for sharing this information. I hope that attendees got a lot out of it. And I think it's just really important to reiterate that whatever organization we work for and represent, it's important to make connections across organizations and to reach out and use each other as resources. And so we really appreciate you being here and sharing this with us. And I want to wish everybody a wonderful weekend. Have a great one, guys.
Thanks, Kelly.
Take care.